And to me, something that gets lost in all this is, and again, I like all of them, so it's not a personality thing. But I think something as simple as calling them out by name, it seems to be they're not willing to do that. Even Bernie Sanders, who talks about revolution, does not seem willing to call them out by name. And I'm not asking them to call them out by name so that like I could get clicks off of it on YouTube and rant. But I think it's important, if you have, for example, Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez is not lacking for attention from the media. She could pretty much go on any show she wants, whenever she wants. But I see this hesitation to even mildly critique President Biden, or I saw Congresswoman Omar on, where she seemed to be a little hesitant to criticize Biden. And I don't know if it's simply because, again, we're all human, and obviously they get a lot of threats and attacks on Congress, or if they have this misguided notion, because it seems to me, Congresswoman Jayapal in your backyard in Washington State, they seem to think that the way to go is actually try to expand your coalition, get some of these establishment politicians. Congresswoman Jayapal, for example, just relaunched the Medicare for All bill today, and they're making a big thing that now they have some of these establishment Democrats who previously were against it now as co-sponsors. But I think, as you said, you could resubmit the bill till you're blue in the face. You can get more people to verbally or performatively say they're for it. But if the president of the United States has said, I don't care if it passes, if it comes to my desk, I'm going to veto it. Well, there's your answer. And it doesn't matter what you do legislative maneuvering wise, what you do getting more of these traditionally establishment people on your corner. If the ruling class, because I think Biden is just doing the bidding of the ruling class, as was Trump, if they're not going to do it, then you need kind of more of an outside guerrilla strategy. So you can't get in their heads, but do you feel that they're wasting time trying to resubmit the bill and get more establishment people on? Because it seems to me that's their strategy, try and win the hearts and minds of some of these establishment folks to hop on board with the legislation.
Right. I mean, I think we absolutely need coalition building. In fact, we would not have won any of our victories if Socialist Alternative was by itself. We won victories precisely because we built coalitions that were successful in winning victories. But it's a question of what kind of coalitions and coalition with whom. We did not try to form coalitions with the corporate politicians in City Hall. No, we were absolutely clear whose side we were on. We formed coalitions with progressive labor unions, with ordinary people on the streets who were willing to fight back but had no influence, no organization to speak for them. Many of them were in, union rank and file, but many of them also were non-unionized workers. And the way we did it was by empowering them and building a coalition in the grassroots. So, when we held the 15 Now action conferences, we got hundreds of people, ordinary people, who have no power otherwise except for being in organized solidarity with others like themselves. And we spoke with a combined voice. That's a coalition. But that's not the kind of coalition that you were talking about. The coalition that some of these Congress members are trying to build are with people we know are not on our side. I mean, what kind of coalition are you going to build with someone like Nancy Pelosi when it's very clear she has spent 4 decades in Congress opposing the interests of working people? So it is foolhardy to say that somehow you're going to build a coalition with people who have spent decades in their career opposing very, very things that are very, very important to ordinary people. And this is not the first go around on Medicare for all. So, I'll give you an example in a second, but when progressives, let's not question their intentions. As I said, we don't need to do that. We don't need to be mind readers. Let's look at the outcomes. When you as a progressive try to build a coalition with corporate politicians, what will happen is that they are not going to bend to you. They will force you to bend to them. In other words, what will happen is that we won't get Medicare for all by that strategy, because it is precisely by that strategy we haven't won Medicare for all so far. US is the richest country in the history of humanity, and we have the worst healthcare among the industrialized countries. Why? Because this strategy has been used for decades and it hasn't worked. So if you want to be data driven, and if you want to be if you want to base yourself on victories, then realize that this is not a victory strategy. It is a losing strategy. But what's behind all this is also important. And I don't think we should underestimate how difficult it is. I mean, I can tell you, having been in office as an independent socialist, having fought the establishment for 7.5 years now, with everything thrown at me, all kinds of attacks thrown at me, it's not easy. It is very, very hard. There's a lot of pressure on you, either to bend and become part of the big business establishment and become innocuous, become completely harmless, have no effectiveness at all, or stay on your principles but become marginalized and have no power either, despite your principles. So what we have done is dodge both those pitfalls and succeed while remaining principled, precisely because we have been crystal clear. I, as an elected representative of working people, do not go to City Hall thinking these are my work colleagues. I need their respect and friendship and approval. Therein lies the problem. And it is very hard to go into a workplace every day where the people who are supposedly on your side and working with you are your arch enemies. And that's just the way it is. It is because you have to remember, it's not a normal workplace. This is capitalism. And some politicians are going to overtly represent the interests of the capitalist class. Some politicians will not overtly represent the interests of the capitalist class, but will be unwilling to challenge the bosses, challenge the status quo. And there you are. You have to decide, what are you going to do? Are you going to be part of this ineffective middle, whatever progressive, where they do nothing, but they say nice things? Are you going to be overtly pro-corporate? What are you going to do? So what we did, we rejected both those avenues. And instead, we built our power from the grassroots by empowering other people, by understanding that this is not about you. This is not about me as an elected leader. It is about bringing tens of thousands of people's voices into City Hall, bringing that army into City Hall that can go up against the power of big business. And ultimately, we cannot have delusions of grandeur. We can, capitalism is a deeply hostile system to working people, and winning reforms will not be enough. But even to win these reforms, there is a kind of change in balance of power that you have to bring about if you are to win something. So it's a coalition, yes, but coalition with whom? Not with people who oppose the very thing you stand for. So if you're trying to win Medicare for all, don't go and build coalition with people who oppose Medicare for all. Go to the tens of millions of Americans who do want Medicare for all, yes, who will come out and fight for it, organize rallies, mass action conferences, bring out the voice of the people. But herein lies the problem, Jordan. When you as an elected representative, you start doing that, you start empowering people and organizing rallies, what happens? The other elected officials start hating you. And then they start saying things like, oh, she's odious, she's vicious, she doesn't know how to talk to people, she doesn't know how to build relationships. Well, guess what? Every time ordinary people have had their leaders fight for them, those leaders have come under attack. What do you think they said about MLK? What do you think they said about Malcolm X? My point is that there is no other way in which to accomplish this. Yes, you have to understand that those politicians who are against the interests of working people are also against you. They are not your friends. Your friends are working people. Go to them for respect and approval and support. So the way to not be isolated is to build that kind of support. And we did this in Seattle. Imagine the scale at which we could do this if we had elected representatives actually fighting for Medicare for all, calling for mass conferences in state after state where people, unions, community organizations all come and fight for it, especially in the middle of a pandemic. It is a hugely popular issue.
And I also think I'd like to get your thoughts. We all know in our life, there's been times we've had to argue for things that maybe we don't really have a good argument, or we, for whatever reason, have to kind of exaggerate. But in this case, I mean, you are on such solid ground that it's not just progressives that support the things you're talking about. It's people who voted for Joe Biden, people who voted for Hillary Clinton that are economically in shambles right now, even people, conservatives that are devastated by coronavirus economically, libertarians, you name it. And the thing that I find so startling is, obviously, we don't want to adopt former President Trump's policies or racism or any of that. But I think part of what drew people to him was that he was presenting himself as a fighter. It might have been a lot of bullshit, but he was at least presenting himself as a fighter. Bernie, what has attracted millions to him, yes, the policies, but the presentation of being a fighter. I think that is why a lot of these Republicans, they tend to hoodwink people on the economics, but people gravitate towards politicians that are fighting. We're not talking about violence, but we're talking about at least standing for something. You might not always agree with every single thing, but at least fighting for them. I think why Trump, I mean, honestly, if not for a pandemic that he badly mismanaged, probably would have won in a landslide, because he did keep a lot of his promises to the voters. They were mostly terrible things, but the politicians that seem to be fighting the establishment and actually fighting to keep promises, there seems to be a large public draw to those politicians, even if a lot of them don't stand for what you or I stand for. So my whole point in all this is, again, might not win on each try, but maybe fighting a little beyond tweets would actually galvanize the troops politically to reach your political goals.
Yeah, I think ultimately what the whole Trump example shows, and I think unfortunately there is truth to what you're saying, Jordan, that if Trump had not completely mismanaged the response to the pandemic, then it's not clear what would have happened. And in fact, what the Trump phenomenon, and in fact, Trump may be defeated, but Trumpism hasn't gone away, and the threat of right populism still remains. And so this is a serious question for the left. It's not just about doing a review of the past. And the whole Trump phenomenon, what does it show more than anything? What it shows is the complete absence, the vacuum that absence of the left, the vacuum on the left that Trump was able to exploit. He's a con man. He's a billionaire and a reactionary billionaire who was able to act as a con man, take in these votes from people who, for the most part, are just fed up with corporate politics. They hate the Republicans, they hate the Democrats with good reason, because none of them has done anything for them. As you said, people's living standards have really cratered, not only, obviously through the pandemic, but even before then. And I think we have to be very clear. We have to build a united multiracial fight back against racism. We have to bring people of all genders together in a fight against sexual violence and against sexism. But the way to do that really is to bring about a larger unity among working people.
Hope you enjoyed that last video. Hop on over to statuscoup.com, where you can sign up for our email list and become a member for as low as $5 to $10 a month. Membership is how we grow. That's statuscoup.com/join. And remember, join our email list so we can grow the revolution with you.